We start then with the latest on the killing of those 3 US troops at an American base in Jordan. Today, Iran has denied involvement in the drone attack near the Syrian frontier, saying it was not seeking an expansion of the conflict in the Middle East. But President Biden has blamed Iran-backed militant groups operating in Syria and Iraq. And indeed, yesterday, one such group called the Islamic Resistance claimed it had launched drone attacks on bases in Syria, including one, it said, near the Jordanian border. Well, to discuss, our terrorism expert Wassim Nasr is with me. And Wasim, first of all, just break down for us what it is we know this Monday. First, about that base that was hit in Jordan.
So actually it's an outpost, it's an American outpost which was reinforced with American troops since the evacuation of some facilities in Qatar back in 2021, because the idea of the Americans at the time was to put away US soldiers from direct Iranian threat, knowing that in January 2020 the base of Ain al-Assad in Iraq was hit by Iranian missiles. So it was a kind of, we will take them to Jordan, it will be a more useful leverage, you see, up to the point where they got it actually there in Jordan, as you said. So this base is just next to another base, the Tanaf base, which is an important American base there with regular soldiers, not only special operation forces, with Syrian rebels that are financed by the Americans, and with the buffer zone. Here we see this base that is used in the fight against the Islamic State, but also in the process of countering Iranian influence in the region. This base was hit by Iranian in 2021, and it was used by the Israelis. The air corridors which led to the base used by the American Air Force was used also by the Israelis in order to hit Shia militias in Syria. So it was used in a periodic way with the CENTCOM approval until Mattis, the former defense secretary, U.S. former secretary of defense in 2020, stopped this collaboration because he wanted to avoid retaliation on American troops. I don't know if today the Israelis are still using those aerial corridors, but actually they used it at a time, and Iran retaliated directly and getting messages through the Americans telling them Israelis has to stop to use those aerial corridors because it was efficient for the Israelis, since the Syrians did not know if the airplane was Israeli or American until it was too late.
I see. And this isn't the first time American bases have been hit since the Hamas attacks of October the 7th, although it is the first time American troops have been killed.
Yes.
So what bases were hit previously, and how did the Americans respond to those previous attacks?
Actually, we are talking about 180 attacks since the 7th of October. You know, it's a huge amount of attacks. We have a map. We'll see the most important attacks, of course. Otherwise, the map won't be clear enough to see. So here what we see in red are the latest attacks. So since the 7th of October against American facilities, one was even evacuated in Himo, northern Syria. And what we see in blue is American strikes on Shia militia in response of those attacks. And of course, the first killing that we see here next to in Al-Rukban, next to At-Tanaf, where 3 American soldiers were killed. So this is something very significant that we are seeing, and the fact that U.S. military were killed is actually a game changer today.
Now, we know that Tehran has explicitly denied any involvement in the killing of these 3 Americans. What do you make of that? Is that a fair assessment?
Well, actually, Tehran will always deny. That's the way they proceed in the region. They always have proxies that act on their behalf, but who have similar agendas, you know, as the Houthis, as the Iraqi militias, as the Syrian Shia militias. They have the same objectives, if I may say, as Iran. So they act in coordination with Iran. And what we see here on the screen is a killer drone that fell from a truck actually in Babel in Iraq, and we see it's Iranian technology, which is used in Yemen, used in Iraq, and used in Syria. But we have to know that since the death of Qasem Soleimani in January 2020, all those groups have more and more independence in taking their orders from the Revolutionary Guard. And one last thing that we should emphasize on, that the Revolutionary Guard in Iran has an agenda which is outplaying in the region, but the political establishment doesn't always have the same aims. You see, for example, one thing that we talked about a few weeks ago is the Kerman attack. committed by the Islamic State in Iran. We know today that the Americans warned the Iranians before the attack that they are going to be hit by the Islamic State, which means that there's some level of talking, some level of still of coordination, but sometimes those proxies can do things that can drag Iran into a bigger, confrontation in the region. So it's a very volatile situation today, knowing that the Revolutionary Guard can use also the feelings or that the Syrians have, for example, against the Kurdish factions held by the Americans in eastern Syria. We know that Iran is trying to arm new militias in eastern Syria regarding and relying on Arab tribes in that region that want to get rid of Kurdish influence. So the situation is very volatile as we speak, and it could go one way or another.